Good morning. The Washington State University Board of Regents will convene our November 16th, 2023 meeting. I'm Lisa Keohokalole Shower and the chair of the board. We'll begin today by acknowledging that Washington State University locations statewide are on the homelands of the Native peoples who lived in this region from time immemorial. The university expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude toward these original and current caretakers of the region. Members of the public are invited to view the Board of Regents meeting via YouTube live stream. A link to the live stream is available on the Board of Regents website. We will have public comment at the meeting at the designated time, which will be Friday, November 17th, after the regular agenda items. We welcome our community to provide us input. If you wish to make a public comment and have not signed up yet, you can do so by using the online form found at regents.wsu.edu. You can email regents@wsu.edu, or you can contact the board's assistant, Tracy Jordal. Public comments may be made in person or virtually, and requests will be received until Tuesday, November 15th at 5 p.m. The Regents will now hold an executive session to review the performance of a public employee and to discuss litigation or potential litigation with legal counsel. This session will be closed. The executive session will conclude at 10:15 unless it's extended by further announcement. If any action is taken as a result of these discussions, it will be taken tomorrow in open session. At this time, I would ask everyone but our legal counsel to please leave the room. We intend on restarting the meeting at 10:15 this morning. Thank you. The Regents will now reconvene in open session. We will start with the Executive and Governance Committee. I am going to go ahead and move us to a 5-minute break before we start the Executive and Governance Committee. So the Regents will now take a quick break.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm sorry to.
Lisa, you need it, yeah.
I have one, they're just not letting me have it yet, so.
One thing done.
All right. I hesitate to ask folks to stop being able to connect because I so appreciate connection time. However, we have a very full agenda today and I want to keep us moving forward. I'd like to go ahead and open the Executive and Governance Committee. And we'll start with the presentation of 3 future action items. I'd like to invite President Schultz and Executive Director for Policy and Governance, Danielle Hess, to present the first 2 items.
Oh, I got the short chair.
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Danielle.
I
know, I had.
So these should be pretty quick. These are kind of primarily housekeeping items. I have a couple of proposed policy revisions as future action items. These have been ready to go since March. We were going to do them as a package with some other items, but decided we just needed to kind of get these through. So the first one is some proposed revisions to the conflict of interest policy. And these were motivated by the addition of the faculty region in 2022. The current policy states that with regard to the student regent, it's not a conflict of interest to vote on matters of general interest to students. And so we went ahead and added similar language with respect to the faculty regent. So, you know, in the event that there was an issue that involved the faculty regent specific department or college, then they would need to kind of go through the process, consult with the chair and the attorney general's office. But otherwise, in general, it's not a conflict of interest. And we thought we should go ahead and specifically state that. We also added the statutory language regarding prohibiting voting on hiring, discipline, and tenure of specific faculty and also personnel for students, because that does relate to conflict of interest. And in the policy, we just simply mirror the statutory language exactly. So no changes there. Other edits, we refer to the university ethics policy, and we also added the ethics compliance advisor as a resource. And then you can see just some general updates in language and organization. Any questions on that? The next one is, oh, shall I go ahead and just carry on? Okay, there's a future action item number 2, and that's proposed revisions to the policy on committee charters. Is even hopefully less controversial. The impetus of this one was to make it clear that the Board of Regents is responsible, since the strategic committees are responsible for considering and providing oversight over both the system strategic plan and the campus strategic plan. And that makes it consistent with the Board of Regents delegation policy, in which the Board of Regents has expressly reserved authority to approve both system and campus strategic plans. Added some additional specific responsibilities for the executive committee with respect to reviewing and updating Board of Regents policies, and encouraging all regents to complete mandatory training in a timely manner. Other than that, just some wording updates and organizational things. So, any questions on that one? All right, I'm out of here.
Okay, so
Thank you.
yeah, the challenge is, can everyone else do their reports as quickly? Yeah. Thank you, Danielle. These are future action items, so if you do have questions, now's the time. All right. Let's move to the next agenda item, which is our meeting schedule. And we've got in the packet the proposed schedule for 2025. The schedule is based on the revised discussion that we had regarding the inclusion of meetings, 2 of our meetings in the Seattle area. We also looked at there has been a history of combining commencement with the Board of Regents meeting. And after a really good conversation about why that occurs and does that help our team by having a Board of Regents meeting literally right before commencement, we concluded that separating the two would be helpful, also allowing the board to participate in graduation across the system and having the ability to travel. So we've made that change as well. So you'll see reflected in the 2025 schedule that the meeting for our May meeting has been moved up to April.
I'm wondering if the April meeting causes any problems for things like faculty senate that are trying to get things that need board approval through.
That there wouldn't be enough time potentially?
Yes, that shifts the schedule back for anything shared governance does that needs board approval. And I think right now we're in a pretty good situation because we have delegated a lot to Kirk. And so I just wanted to take a moment to think about, is there going to be a time pressure from that?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure.
For those children.
So I would suggest that usually when we have approval of new degree programs or changes to major degree programs, things that the faculty senate would want to review and approve, we usually do future action item and then action item. And so since that would not change, typically we can't get an action item on the May if we haven't already done it in January.
Yeah.
Or
Or
March. So it actually just shortens the time between future and actually action. I would ask Christina if I'm missing any pieces of this.
No, I think that's accurate. And in addition to your question, we're going to try to move more of the faculty senate business to having an October 1 submission date to allow for the pipeline to be front loaded so that we're not bringing as much to the Regents in the second half of the academic year.
I think the other thing that's also changed is we've delegated a lot more responsibility to the president. And that's made it so that we used to have a lot of stuff come in the May meeting. And now it's much better managed, I think. So maybe not an issue. Thank you for at least taking a minute to think about it.
Thank you for raising it. Okay. Any other questions, comments regarding the revised schedule? Okay. All right. I want to just do a quick little shout out to Regent Pika, who has arranged for this year in 2024, our ability to utilize Seattle Children's Hospital for our board meeting in January. And so this is just a really great opportunity, given how many alumni and industry partners are in the Seattle area, for us to have 2 touch points in that area. And we'll start with a relationship and a partnership with Seattle Children's for our next board meeting. So thank you. Okay, we are going to invite our advisor from the Association of Governing Boards, Kevin Riley, who was with us at our last board meeting, to just have a bit of a conversation with us. And so, Kyle, can we see Kevin a little bit better?
As soon as you start speaking.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Kevin. I sent out prior to this meeting just some prompts regarding some of the conversation that we're hoping to have. I also added this is a non-presentation dialogue for the rest of this short committee meeting, and that some of the work that you did to participate in a survey, we're going to actually move to a discussion in January. And with that, I would really like to pass the time over to you, Kevin, and appreciate your counsel and your working back and forth with us on how to be prepared for this session. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Lisa. Great to be with you. See you all again. I was looking forward to coming out and being with you in person, but my wife had some emergency surgery on Sunday night, and I just got back from the hospital this morning, so I need to be here. But good to see you even electronically. So yeah, as Lisa said, based on the discussions that she and I had earlier this week, we thought, here's how we can make this session of most use to you. We won't focus on the survey for now. Some of the survey responses that some of you made or some of you may have seen can still, I think, inform part of the bigger conversation we want to have here today. And I want to emphasize that word conversation. And I think some of the discussion we had at your September meeting on the principles of trusteeship can also help inform today's conversation. But Lisa thought you all feel, and it's a very common feeling among boards, that you never seem to have enough time to push back a bit, push back from hearing about individual challenges or pressing issues, and talk with each other about how you think this board should operate. So she tells me in her role as chair, she'd like to hear you talk with each other about how you think this board should operate. So today, let's look at the three, I'll call them meta questions on this session's agenda, and see how you all think about the fundamental opportunities of your role as a regent in Washington State University. And that's, let's see, I see the principles of trusteeship. First slide is up. We really don't need that up. We can talk about the three questions. Yeah, there we go. There we go. That's what we want. So I'm going to keep as quiet as I can, as long as your conversation is lively, and we'll dive right into them. How's that, Lisa? All that makes sense?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin.
All right. Well, let's go right to number one. Back to those questions on the screen, if we could. Those three questions. The first one: what's one thing going forward you would want the board to do more of or be better at? Anything you'd like the board to do less of? I think I think of this as kind of the, when you wake up in the middle of the night and you think to yourself, I really wish we had done that. Or conversely, we really don't need to be doing so much of that, do we? So what do you think? What would you like to do more of, be better at, do less of as a board? Who would like to start?
Yes, please.
Okay, so from my point of view, and I'm the longest serving regent, and I've seen a lot of progress on both, and it changed because when I first came on the board, it was a lot of reports, and including going into too much, from my point of view, minutia. So like we were dealing with parking fees and minor changes to the faculty manual and things like that. So, but we didn't really have as much discussion time perhaps as we needed. So we've been making some progress on that over the years. From my point of view, I think we could spend more time in meaningful discussion on things, and we're really trying to work that through, but there's always room for improvement. I think it's worthwhile going through and just sort of thinking about what we do at each meeting to see, are there, other things that some of the things we used to do, we delegated to the president for approval, and then we just get a brief report, and that makes a lot of sense. Are there some other things that we either delegate or we don't spend as much time on? And so I think that that's a discussion in itself, perhaps at a retreat, to sort of go through those items. So
that's great. But I always thought parking on campus was the most important issue to faculty and staff.
it'll raise people's tackles a lot.
Others on this question.
I guess one thing that I would like to be more connected to is with the students. I mean, we come and we have these sessions and we get, reports and things that are important for us to deal with. But as a regent, I would like to be connected to more of the students on the campuses. and explaining what we do, because if you ask most of the students today, what's a regent? And they'll say they don't know. And I think, they deserve an explanation, or at least from us, some connection to them, so that, and, I've tried very hard to be connected to students that ask me to come and speak on campus, or be connected, find out more about how I came to college, those types of things. And I think that's important, and particularly for Latino students, to see someone that looks like them connected to their community. But that's one thing that I would like to have more connection with. I don't feel like we do that very well.
To bounce off, I love that, just because you're right. We had this conversation last night of what is a regent? The amount of times I've pulled out our website to students has been amazing, but the one thing we don't have is, what are our core principles? As a board, what do we believe in? What are some things that, we see value in? And of course, we have like our vision, and we have the university's mission statement, but as a collective group, what do we stand for? All our backgrounds are so different, a lot of different contexts, but as a group, as one board, what do we want to make sure we get clear to students, whether that just be our mission statement, or like I said, make it more clear on our website, because I've showed it to a lot of students, and it's always fun to see like, oh, I've seen her before, but they, like, what is a regent? What does a regent do? Because you look at our website and a lot of good information about our meetings, meeting minutes, but not, what do regents really do, and how do you connect? How do students connect to that bigger picture? But I totally agree with Regent Serna.
Okay, comment.
Well, and I think I can build on, stakeholder sort of focus. I guess what I'd like to see more of is how do we compete for the future? And have those discussions at a strategic level with force and with urgency. So the world around us is changing quickly. And my observation on the board is, pace. We have so many things that require blocking and tackling that gets in the way of today and managing today versus having readiness for the future. I mean, this is really old news, but topics like AI, are we taking it seriously, or do we get so consumed with ourselves that we can't see past it to get our students ready for the future to serve the state of Washington? So for me, it's all about serving that greater purpose, but to Laura's point, getting past, the daily administrative necessary items and creating capacity. So we need to create more capacity to focus on strategic topics that are more future oriented and really mean it or do something about it.
I'll build on that, because that's where I was going as well. And I think I want to think about how do we differentiate ourselves in the world of higher education, especially as everything is changing so rapidly around us. And so all technologies and AI and other things that we need. But moreover, I often think that WSU is one of the best kept secrets in the state of Washington. I have said that multiple times in Regent meetings. How do we differentiate ourselves as a university, as this future students have the ability to choose where they go? Why would they choose WSU? And how do we draw people in and become the university that others aspire to be? And to really think about that.
I would just.
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, some of us, a few of us, I believe, are going to be in Boston for the conference of other trustees. And I've always put a great value in what we can learn from peer institutions and from perhaps members, trustees of other peer institutions. Kind of, we don't know perhaps in some instances, but I think that's worthwhile. And I'm not sure who that is or how that gets set up, but I would look forward to going to that conference and seeing if something could be established where there's a communication of how they deal with certain issues that we deal with, just on a peer-to-peer level. The other thing I would add is I'm so enjoying this orientation time as a new region on the block that the bubble over my head is just keep going, because I'm learning so much, not just kind of from a function standpoint, but from a who's who standpoint. Yesterday, coming early, being able to meet with a couple key leaders here. And I don't know if that's possible. I think it's maybe more possible now with my schedule versus some who are working actively, but just that learning process of, because it's so big and so vast, and it's really helping me. And I think I'm just going to keep going.
Very good. Others on this question? If I'm hearing you right, it does not sound to me like there's a feeling that there's a lot of things you need to be doing more of, or a lot of things you need to be better at, maybe doing some less things. It's always that sense of how do we focus on the most important things. But it's kind of nice to hear that you feel that you've got your operation set up in a way that does allow you to get at some of the most important things. And it's always the struggle, as somebody said. You can always do better, being better at the most important things. But I'm glad to hear that you're sounding like you're where you almost to where you want to be. And there are ways, obviously specific ways you can focus more on students and focus more on how you are planning for the future, and focus more on what your unique attraction is to students in the marketplace. And those are a couple thoughts you might want to pursue then from today's meeting. Let me go on to the second question, because I know we're shorter on time because your executive session got extended a bit. This one, how would you describe the difference between the culture of the university and the culture of your profession? How does that difference affect how you see your role as a regent? So, where we come from defines us all, at least in part. It defines who we are in part. And does that make you think think of your regent role differently from the way somebody who comes from a different profession or place might think of it? As I looked over your backgrounds, you've got, great variety of different kinds of professional backgrounds in media and venture capital and the airline industry and technology. And all of those cultures are really very different from the culture of the institution that you are now overseeing as one of its governors. So how do you see all that working? How do you bring what you know about the culture of your profession to the university? How do you adjust for overseeing what is, again, a very different kind of culture and entity than where most other people in the world make their living? Any thoughts on that?
I'd have to say speed.
Yeah.
Or thereof. And I think, university setting versus what I used to do for a living, which was react to things on a much more quickly in my profession. So yeah, that's something I haven't gotten used to that, and don't know that I ever would, but I think that sometimes I have a sense of a lack of urgency, and I'd like to see that change.
Are there some virtues to that more deliberate pace as well, in your view?
I suppose there is. I mean, time to think about things, but I don't know, we've had a lot of crises that for just a few
Yeah.
years. So I think in trying to address some of those things, I don't know, sometimes I feel like at times we, just how we react to those and some of the things we do, there is even there, kind of a lack of urgency. And I don't know if that's completely the way to describe it, but anyway.
I think this is a larger and larger issue for campuses around the country, in part because of the speed of social media. So in the old days, those of us working as presidents and then helping to develop the next generation of presidents would talk about getting out ahead of the curve, ahead of the crisis, ahead of the issue. And now, in almost every instance, given social media and the speed at which it travels, at least 100 people on the campus know what's going on and know about the crisis before the president does. So it's a very different world we're living in, and the traditional pace that the university has worked in often seems out of sync with it, even more sometimes than it did in the past. So the question is, how can you keep the good aspects of that very deliberative, thoughtful, educational kind of mindset, and at the same time on the administrative side, move to get out ahead of the crisis as much as you can, or at least react quickly in a way that helps to diminish it if you're thinking in crisis management mode. So, but I think there is more of a tension on this issue than there used to be in the past. But
I think the way that we're organized and the fact that we're a public institution and our ability, and I think to what Regent Cerno was trying to say is that we can't move as quickly as we'd like to. The meetings have to be public. We have to follow a certain protocol in order to be able to even convene, and how we then act within that confine. If this was a company like mine, if we make a determination on something, we'll do a deep dive on it. We'll meet the next day or the next week, and there's speed matters. And it doesn't seem, while I believe speed matters especially to remain relevant and current in the realm of education, it seems like this is a wheel that just moves much slower, does not spin at the rate in which a public company would.
Yeah, I would kind of jump on that same comment. In my head, there is a tolerance of relevance that I think is becoming less and less for higher ed. And I think you're seeing that and feeling that in enrollment. In this institutional hierarchy, that it's very difficult to turn the ship, right, of what has been decades and decades and generations of various thinking. In the world I come from and the culture I come from, fair does not mean equal. And I think that, that's some of that is difficult to kind of wrap your head around. And what I mean by that is that, it's, well, my bonus is not the same as this person's bonus, so it's not fair. And we deal with a lot of that in the private sector. I kind of consistently have these conversations with an individual, like somebody that might say, well, I would like to make as much money as this salesperson. And I'm like, well, you can have that job tomorrow if you'd like it. You're going to be straight commission and you're going to have a clock that starts every 30 days, but you are welcome to have that. Well, no, I kind of want this fairness piece over here too. And I think I struggle a little bit making the transition into higher ed in that there is a desire to consistently want things to kind of all be the same. And I'm just not sure you can stay relevant and have that occur at the same time, as well as the pace in which the relevant scale is changing beneath us.
I think what's really there's a lot of potential here. So I see, the, you know, I don't know that I think that is a great difference. I think there's so much potential and diversity in all of the academic programs at this R1 level. But our ability to capture, you know, capture strength from those opportunities at speed is a real difference. And there are a lot of parallels with large organizations, commercially outside, hybrid organization behavior, you know, this functional excellence versus I'm a business unit with my own campus. We see that dynamic in the organization. And when you can get full alignment at speed and focus on the vital few things, this organization can make tremendous strides forward. I just see a lot of potential, but we choose, everybody in this room gets to choose focus and pace. And so I see similarities and still a lot to unlock.
So I would just add that I think the conversations around pace has certainly been, having spent my career on the private side, has been kind of maybe even a perception or maybe a barrier. I would also say that having spent the last few months in this role as chair, I've seen more hustle and innovation that probably is not necessarily seen outwardly from our leadership team that does reflect relevance and focus. And I think what makes us great at WSU. And so I do think that while I struggle with, in fact, I was just on the phone with Nathan this morning, I'm like, can I just make that decision now? And it's the layers of public process, the layers of decision-making is both a virtue, because I think we're thoughtful and balanced, while also seeing what happens kind of when you pull the curtain back a bit. There's just a tremendous amount of, I think, good, big thinking, innovation, reflection of relevance, and focus that's moving us forward. I just don't know that we always see that from the outside. And I've just felt honored and humbled by what I see in terms of how folks are moving forward, which is more in alignment with the private side than I thought maybe from the outside.
Great to hear. Others on this question?
Well, issues on like related to pace, I wonder, I'm real curious about enrollment as we come out of COVID especially. You know, what are those new numbers? And I've, you know, quickly learned, of course, that enrollment is bread and butter. It has such a huge financial implication. And I'm not sure we've had to go out and truly, like the private marketplace where you're, you know, you're marketing, and our enrollment numbers are so critical. So I'm not sure we've had to do that in the past. That's my impression so far. Maybe that's not true, but I just know how important those enrollment numbers are and how we as an institution can ensure, especially in the climbing, the context is, it's changing so much. There's questions around the value proposition. And I think it's really important that we can move toward that we can, those numbers can increase. More is better.
I see like there's a tension between the academic side and then kind of this other side of, well, marketing and these types of things to be able to act quickly. And kind of reminds me of like, because I worked in public television and then I worked in commercial television, and there's in commercial television, everything was about go, 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 money, 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 get ratings, those types of things. Public television, not so much, although, you know, it was a nonprofit, but there was also that mentality of like, you know, we kind of do these things traditionally. But you know, our world has changed. I mean, we mentioned about social media in the beginning of this. I mean, adapting to those things, and we're more digital today. Everything's like boom, boom, boom. So somehow, I think higher education has to adapt and make a transformation. We heard this at the conference we went to in San Diego last year, where, you know, and I think it was sort of one of these things where enrollment was really the big conversation because everybody was facing that issue. And, you know, one of the speakers said that, you know, higher education has to transform itself, but that's going to be a real hard thing because it has been used to doing things in a very traditional way and all of that, which I can totally understand because that's, I think a lot of businesses or even in media, there was just this, okay, how do we monetize doing social media? How do we, you know, how do we do digital first? All of these things. And some people just wondering, what is digital first? And so I think that there's a real tension there. And so there has to be a transformation. Not be, you know, kicking, screaming, going there, but it has to happen. So
I will say,
Closing, yeah, go ahead.
well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say is that I come from a, well, I spent some time in the private sector. I spent most of my career in the public government sector. And so, I mean, I sort of feel the university, I do feel like you can't move quite as quickly, but I've been used to a federal establishment, which doesn't move all that quickly. So it hasn't really bothered me all that much. But what I will say is that in my years being involved with WSU, I have seen that when WSU needs to do it, they do. I mean, one of the most impressive things I've seen in faculty senates typically have a reputation for not moving very fast. I see Judy smiling, but when we needed the faculty senate to act and approve curriculum for the medical school on a really quick timeline, they just were all in and got the job done. I mean, so the university can move quickly. There are some things like when we've been talking about one WSU, it's I mean, to some of us, it feels like a glacial process, but there are so many stakeholders throughout the university enterprise that I think if you're going to do some major change, systemic change, you need to reach out and touch groups. You can't, if you just do a top down, well, we've decided we're going to do this slam, you know, everybody's back go up and then it's not as easy as it is. So I think it's sort of the nature of the beast, but I have been encouraged over the years to see that when action is truly needed to be fast. I mean, just local example with our board, it used to be that every single item we voted on in one meeting, it was a future active item. Then it became an action item months later. And we just started looking at things differently. Well, you know, we can consider this one meeting, but if it makes sense for the university progress to say, we're just going to move this up to an action item to get it rolling because we know what the right answer is. We've been doing a lot more of that. And I think that's promising. We just need to sort of search for those things and prioritize, well, where do we really need to move fast? And then some other areas, it just doesn't matter as much.
You mentioned stakeholders, and I think and there being many in the university, and that is certainly true, and a lot of people outside the university who feel they have a stake in it as well, who you often need to take into account. And part of the challenge there is, I think, very often different stakeholders think they're holding a different stake. It's not all one organization for them. It's a collection of different organizations with different purposes, and that does make shared governance all the more challenging. But I'll leave this question with this thought. So if you had told me at University of Wisconsin-Madison that we would put up something like 8,000 courses in 2.5 weeks, either totally in hybrid form or in mixed form, and that the faculty would drive that and do it and teach students that way, you did this same thing because of COVID. I would have said before COVID, take this person to the local psychiatric facility because they've clearly gone insane. And we still haven't quite reckoned with the huge and quick change that took place because it had to under the circumstances of a national pandemic. And I think we can look to some of that in the future and how that happened to think about the pace with which we need to move in the world we find ourselves in. We're getting close to the end of the time. Let's move to the legacy question. What do you hope your legacy will be? When I first got into the job at Wisconsin, somebody said to me very early on, think legacy, Kevin. And that always stuck in my mind. And I think having somebody say that to me early on was a good thing. How do you think about that? What do you do to as a regent now to shape the legacy you want? If somebody said, well, a year or so after you depart from the board, wow, Regent X really did a great job because she focused on this. How do you think about that?
Kevin, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I have a legacy that I think is quite unusual as one of the first faculty regents. And I come to the table, I learned so much. I almost jumped in on the last question and said, I thought as a faculty member, I knew all about universities, and boy, every meeting I come to, I learned so many good things. But I think for me, I want to make sure that my board members think I'm bringing value to the board. I want my faculty colleagues to see that I'm bringing value back to them. And I want other universities to see that this is working for us. And hopefully it is. I just want to be in a position to promote this idea of bringing a faculty member to the Regents. And I feel like it's a great opportunity for WSU in both directions. I take so much back to the faculty and the faculty view of things. And I feel like that two-way street is critical, and I feel like it's really important.
Well said. Thanks.
I'm struggling a little bit with the question, to be honest, because I think it could be a little dangerous for us each individually to be having what we want as a legacy, because we could whiplash a university in about a nanosecond. So
Right.
I'm struggling with that. As far as, I don't see it as me as a regent. I think I have a responsibility to be aligned with the 8 others and the direction in which and insisting and setting direction and ensuring the president has the tools they need to be able to lead the institution. I've just been a part of boards in the past where the board chair comes in with a real personal agenda, and I can be very dangerous to an organization. So I struggle a little bit candidly with the question.
Yeah.
I agree.
Fair. That's a fair comment. And I think it is, a board is a social network, and figuring out how you and your interests fit in that network, how you and your interests fit in the university is clearly a really important part of your role as a regent, leading all these various stakeholders down to where they need to be for the next millennium. And this is putting me in mind a little of something that Dick Chait, who was a longtime professor at the education school at Harvard, who specialized in higher education governance, said about free gifts a board member can give to a university. And they're kind of sequential gifts. And they are oversight, insight, and foresight. And his thinking was that, when you first get on a board, you're overseeing lots of new things that you haven't overseen before. There is a certain somewhat regulatory aspect of oversight you need to come to grips with pretty quickly. But if you learn through that initial oversight, you develop some insight. The oversight's about, well, how does this all work here? I need to understand that. You get to the level of insight where it's a little more, well, I think I understand enough now. I'm dangerous enough now to maybe try to start making some contributions on how to make it all work better. And then the third level of foresight is a point where you can really help the president and the university see over the next couple of peaks into where the university needs to be, where you think it should and needs to be 10 years from now. So it's kind of interesting in my mind to think about the legacy question across those three progressive gifts, as Chait called them. So I don't know if that helps with the question or not, but I always liked his view of the progression in the life of a region in that sense. Well, I know we're a little over already, and Lisa, you tell me whether we need to call time or you want to go on a bit with this discussion.
Well, I think I was in particular interested in how folks would respond to that question, primarily because of what you just shared, Regent Dickinson. I think of my legacy as in service, and so I was interested to hear kind of where other folks might respond, and I appreciate that we have had at least some time to be able to have a discussion, particularly around the first two questions. I would just ask if there's any other comments that the other regents might want to make about the last question or anything that we've covered before we wrap up the session.
I had one, and I had the same reaction to that question, but I think as a board, if we had a legacy, it would be a little bit in reacting to Enrique's comment about this question about higher ed and kind of how we react to the situation that higher ed is in right now. So if we had a legacy as a board, as opposed to as individuals, to me, it would be figuring out whether higher ed is in a unique moment of needing to transform. So is that true? Is that not true? And what, and what are those factors that are shaping that need for transformation? And then helping the president establish what that transformation path looks like. To me, that is, the sort of the key components of board activity are hiring and firing your CEO, or in our case, president, and then setting strategy. And if the pundits and researchers are all correct that this is this very critical time of transformation in higher ed, then our big job is to react to that and set a pretty new path for our institution. And that's an environment that, of course, I am very used to because I'm living in that little change bubble of venture capital all the time. But it seems like we're kind of in that in higher ed as well, of having to blow up business models and reinvent them. I don't know that, so I'm still saying that's a question, but that would be sort of question number one for a board such as ours, I would think.
Yeah, another way of saying that is I think a great legacy for any regent or any board is that you look back and can say, well, we served as good thought partners with our administrative leadership, helping him, her, and them get to the kind of transformations that they need to get to in the moment when we were serving on the board. That's a slightly different version of what you were saying, but I think it complements it.
Okay. This personal as a legacy, I would just say for me, it'd be brown, proud, and loyal too. But I'd also say that the diversity of this board to me is really important, because if I look at the history of this institution and the board, it was very white in the past. It isn't so much now. And we have very strong women, which, I think is very cool. So I think, from as a whole, that makeup of this board, I think, is really, that's an important legacy going forward. But it also, I think, we're also with a board that has a mix of people from different walks of life and professions that can take us in new directions and open us, to the things that we have to look at to make sure that WSU is going to stay competitive and be involved in growing what we need to do from our enrollment and all those things. So I think that's a great part of this legacy, and hopefully that would continue. But I think the diversity part of it, to me, is just really crucial.
So, Kevin, do you want to wrap us up?
Well, just to say thanks. I really, from my point of view, this session kind of captured what Lisa and I had talked about. It was open, honest, listening to each other and talking about some very basic things in terms of your role as the governors of this great institution. So I thank you for being honest and for speaking up, and hopefully it will help Lisa and the rest of you work in the future in a way that builds on the kind of sense of yourselves as individual contributors and sense of yourself as a board that you've really started to talk about today. So thanks for letting me be part of it.
Thank you for facilitating that conversation. Those were great questions. We hope to see Kevin in person in January, and we'll send out some more information about what that looks like. If you have input on what you're hoping that we might be able to engage with Kevin on, let me know. But I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Happy healing.
All right, so that concludes the executive and governance meeting. And we are just a few minutes over our time, but I am going to go ahead and pass the meeting to Academic and Student Affairs Committee Chair, Regent Pika.
So welcome everyone to our committee meeting, and we have a very brief agenda, just one agenda item. So I'm going to invite Provost and Executive Vice or President Chilton and Associate Vice President Health Sciences and Academic Programs Craig Parks, who Craig is going to join us virtually to discuss accreditation. We talked about this in September in Pullman, and so hopefully we will be able to take action on this tomorrow.
Absolutely, thank you, Regent. Yeah. Excuse me. So you all have in your board book the year 6 accreditation report. And we discussed this at the September meeting. Our accreditors, the NWCCU, have started a new requirement for this round where we have a review in year 6. Normally it was year 3 and year 7, but they've added the year 6, which is a slightly lighter accreditation check-in because it does not include a site visit, but it does include a report. That way they can potentially, we are due to submit that no later than March. And then in June, our accreditation liaison officer, who is Craig Parks, will attend the Board of Commissioners meeting, and they will review the report with him. That then gives us some feedback so that we can prepare well for the year 7, which is the complete site visit and a more intensive look at our accreditation. So if they signal anything that we might want to look at or strengthen or correct or what have you, gives us that temperature taking. So I will just say that tomorrow we would be asking for you to approve the report. And if there were any suggestions or changes that you had, we would be able to implement those before we submit in March. But I will turn it over to Craig, who can add to what I have said. And maybe Craig, you could then talk about what happens after, and then be able to answer questions.
Can do. Thank you, Provost Chilton. Hello, everyone. As Provost Chilton pointed out, and as of you remember from our last comprehensive review in 2018, In years past, our responsibility was to complete one omnibus self-study that was then submitted about 4 weeks before the site visit would occur. Our last visit in 2018, the self-study ran in excess of 400 pages. A difficult thing for anyone to read through. And so to simplify the process and allow for more well-rounded feedback, a couple of years ago, NWCCU split the process into this year 6 report that you have in front of you covers the institution's policies, finances, and resources. As Provost Chilton pointed out, we will not have a site visit in the spring. Instead, I will be attending the NWCCU Board of Commissioners meeting in June of 24 when they talk about all of the year 6 reports, not just mine. There'll be a couple dozen of them total, but I will be there and prepared to answer questions. This is designed to give institutions some early warning of possible concerns that might arise during the comprehensive site visit. I was at the NWCCU annual meetings most of last week, and a point that was regularly impressed upon us was that the accrediting bodies are indeed seeing an uptick in financial problems and policy issues, and to a lesser extent, resource issues. Primarily, it's with facilities. And that this was a prime motivator for separating the report into these 2 sections. A year from now, we will be asking you to approve the second half, the year 7 report, which will focus exclusively on mission fulfillment, and that is specifically academic mission fulfillment. We won't really be reporting on research or extension outreach. We will a little bit, but the strong focus will be on academic mission fulfillment, and in particular, undergraduate academic mission fulfillment. That report, that year 7 report, will be due to NWCCU in March of 25. In April of 25, we will have a site visit. It's a little too early to have the details of that, but we do know that it will occur in April of 25. The site visit report will then be reviewed by the Board of Commissioners in June of 25, and July of 25. They will issue our reaffirmation of accreditation letter along with any commendations or recommendations. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? It's not necessarily a question of the process, but just looking at the report and I find it interesting to see the percentage of residents of Washington and, you know, what that looks like per campus. Is there a baseline that that the NWCCU looks for on that? I mean, and does that ever become a problem as far as potential risk in accreditation?
From an accreditation standpoint, no, they don't have any baseline. What they would be looking for is how that number compares to anything in our mission statement about who it is that we primarily target for education. And so as long as there's not a serious discrepancy there, again, at least from an accreditation standpoint, I don't anticipate any issues, but I will defer to Provost Chilton or President Schultz on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry, I did want to just recognize and you know, express my heartfelt thanks to the very large number of people who contributed to this, certainly led by Craig Parks, Vice Provost Christina Peterson Wilson played a large part in this, but people in the staff in the president's office, in student affairs, in the libraries, and enrollment management. I mean, there were people who wrote these sections, and then Craig, and with the support of Christina, really turned this into a coherent document, but a lot of people were involved. So I just want to give my thanks expressly.
Thank you. That's very appropriate. It was a lot of material to go through. So, all right, then we will, without any more questions, we will bring this to the board tomorrow for action. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, we're not only back on schedule, we're ahead of schedule, so I appreciate the report out, and this is definitely a significant report, so congratulations and appreciation to everyone involved. The Regents are now going to go ahead and break for lunch. We will be taking a hard hat tour of the nearly completed Life Sciences building, which I'm super excited to see the progress. The Board of Regents committee meetings will resume at 1 p.m. And with that, I'll go ahead and close the meeting for this morning. Thank you, everyone.